Welcome, everybody, to the Counter Clipping Show, number 249 for December 8th, 2025. And I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. Our topic tonight is Wargaming. All of World War II wouldn't fit on the thumbnail, but yes, we will be talking about strategic level World War II games that cover both the European and Pacific theaters. We are drinking Lagavulin 16, one of the very finest, bottled at a robust 43%, and it's still really good. So anyway, I ran into a dude randomly at the, thank you, David Imperato. I ran into a dude randomly at the Akron Home Depot that played D&D with Tom Moldvay and Lawrence Schick. I didn't know Lawrence Schick was from around here. I knew about Tom Moldvay. Lawrence Schick is apparently still with us and living in Ireland, by the way. Anyway, before we get started, let me remind everybody to please like the video, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that already, and there's a bunch of ways to help support the channel listed in the video description, so check those out. Big shout outs to our patrons here at Ardwulf's Lair, without whom we would not be able to keep doing this, as well as to our good friends at Noble Knight Games, the official sponsors of the Counter Clipping Show, from whom you will hear in a little bit. And there is an affiliate link in the video description as well for Noble Knight. So if you buy some stuff through them, then we have various things can be done with the resulting store credit. One of which is this, that will be given away on next week's show. So I just thought I'd put that up there. So it is a large box. And I am not that unpredictable. The folks have probably already guessed what it is, but we will be giving it away next week, as well as at least two other things. I haven't made a decision. I got a couple extra C3I magazines that might get thrown in there too, but I also don't want to kill myself shipping stuff. So we might wait for the next giveaway for that. So we will see, but we will definitely have two giveaways. I got another Linux update today. The previous update works fine and nothing broke. And in fact, the computer has not crashed since I installed Linux on it. Unless it's something that I did, which did happen at least twice. So in I didn't share the screen, actually. We've got a couple of news items today that we will get to first. I guess I will mention that there will be some major channel announcement next week on show 250 as well, so stay tuned for that. I think everyone will end up pleased by the decisions that have been made. So we do need the banner. Thank you, Danny Seckery, for mentioning that. So if anybody needs to get a hold of me, my email address is in the ticker at the bottom of the screen. So the Traveler game has had its third overall session, second for Team Xerxes, which is the first group that got to play. They found some interesting things out as they get used to dealing with the technology and all of that. But I'm very happy with the way it's going. I felt like I did the best as the referee in the third session. I feel still rusty, but we're starting to get the hang of it again, running every week. So that is going to help. So anyway, let us get to the news as soon as I pull up the actual screen share, which, there we go. All right. Against the Odds magazine has got a Kickstarter up right now. This is for a game called Tiger Wings. This is part of the J.D. Webster Fighting Wings series, which is very well regarded. If you would like to learn more about this series of air combat war games, Doug over at the Tabletop's Edge has a series that he's just started. I think he's got 2 episodes now. The second one just dropped like a couple days ago, and I haven't watched it yet. He's going to walk you through a lot of stuff on this, and Doug knows what he's talking about. If you watch Doug, you'll know why. So this is worth a look. It has already made its very modest goal. 35 days left to go. I am going to throw this link into the chat so picks can hop over to Kickstarter and check the details out if they like. Also on Kickstarter right now is the long-awaited by many Eric Lee Smith's Battle Hymn Volume 2. This is going to cover Bentonville and Shiloh and a bonus scenario for Gettysburg, which I think is in the first game. I think the first game is Gettysburg and Pea Ridge, as I recall. Now, I have not played the board game versions of this, but I have played the digital version that came out of just Gettysburg, and I think it's pretty good and visually attractive as well. That game is called, as I recall, Gettysburg: The Tide Turns by Shenandoah Studios. It is available on Steam. That's where I bought it. I don't have a screen share for this, but I will also note that the digital version of the Great Battles Battles of the American Revolution. I mean, not that the series isn't great, but that's not actually on the box. Battles of the American Revolution Saratoga is now out. That is available on Steam as well. So if you haven't checked out that series, it's probably a good idea to do so if you have any interest in the tactical end of the Revolutionary War at all. I have the tri-pack. And I have not yet. Do I have something other than? No, I don't think I do. There is a tri-pack number 2 with 3 more games on it, and that's going to be another value-added item that I will acquire via probably Noble Knight store credit, to be completely honest. My 2.5 millimeter clipper, by the way, does not play particularly nice with these, at least with these particular counters. It tends to leave a little bit of dog ear on it that I really don't like. So in the meantime, I guess I'm just putting up with it because I don't want to bust out the good old-fashioned nail clipper here on the show, but sometimes you got to. So the Avalon Hill Volume 2 has been in the works for a long time, and a lot of people have been like, hey, where is this thing? Because the first one was pretty well received, as you would expect from Eric Lee Smith, right? So apparently the AI is not great, but it did just launch, and I would expect that the producers of this game will be continuing to improve the AI. I did not feel that, at least at my skill level, that the AI in either Twilight Struggle or Labyrinth, both of which I have, both of which I've played on the digital versions on Steam, were particularly weak. But again, you know, I could suck at those games too, so that could be why. So you can apparently play it solo too. 6 Actual Ray, thanks for stopping by. So yeah, this has been in the cooker for a good long time, and I don't know what the holdup was particularly, but it apparently is basically ready to go now, and will probably ship fairly quickly after the conclusion of this Kickstarter, which is almost over at 4 days remaining. I will also put a link to Battle Hymn Volume 2 in the chat so people can go over and check that out from the fine folks at Compass Games. So let's start talking about, I've done this. Vince Ree snapped to the spring on his 2.5 millimeter Oregon Laminations clipper, second one to eat it. Although if you've got the, well, I mean, you can, the springs on here are really tough springs. You can call Oregon Laminations and ask them for a replacement spring. I did, but I think they'll charge you like $10 for the spring. You might be better off getting the specs on the spring and just ordering your own goddamn springs from somebody like Grainger or McMaster Carr or some online hardware dealer like that. I have not tried to do that, but I have enough springs at this exact moment. And I have blown one spring in the entire time I've been using these clippers, and I use 2 of them. I use one of them most of the time. That's the 2 millimeter. For anything bigger than half-inch counters, I tend to use the 2.5, unless they're like 1-inch counters, in which case I might break out the 3 millimeter, which I have very seldom had cause to use. So if you're going to buy one of these, my advice is always go with 2.5. It is the most versatile, even though mine probably just needs to be taken apart, cleaned, and maybe I'll give the blade just a tiny bit of attention. So, yeah, interesting. Brant's getting nailed by the Grainger ads. I mean, there's worse things to get ads for. I get the ads for the AI girlfriend. So I'll take Grainger or McMaster Carr over that. I've done business with both companies, by the way, in both a personal and professional capacity. So. And you could probably buy a bag of the same springs from either of those places for what you would get charged for one spring from Oregon Laminations. So that's what I would do. I actually tried to replace it with my 3D printer bed springs, and that didn't work. They're just not big. They're just not the right size. I gave it a shot. It was worth trying, but it didn't work out. So I've seen this too. I've seen a lot of this. So anyway, who's yelling at Brand here? Anyway. All right. Perigi says the AI in Twilight Struggle seemingly cannot comprehend European control. Oh, I don't know. Maybe I haven't played that much of it. I certainly, it beat me. Let me put it that way. But again, you know, I'm not that good at Twilight Struggle, to be completely honest. Mr. Mark Herman is here. Mark, thanks for stopping by. So let's have a nice sip of Lagavulin 16. As we segue into strategic level World War II games, now I did have as a as a criteria here, games that at least can be combined with another game to cover the entire war. So we won't be getting to tonight games like Empire of the Sun or Pacific War, or for that matter, any of the number of interesting strategic level World War II games that are set just in Europe, like Unconditional Surrender. There's Supreme Commander, Dan Holt's game, which I've heard good things about, but it released messily and they had to do an update kit or something like that. And it's like, you don't necessarily want to buy it unless you know you're getting the update kit. So we're leaving a whole bunch of things out and focusing only on games that will allow you to play out both the European and Pacific Wars. This is the one exception that is on the screen right now, because as far as I'm concerned, there's an asterisk on this too. As far as I'm concerned, all this was started by Rise and Decline of the Third Reich, a John Prados design that was released in 1974 by Avalon Hill. It went through several editions at Avalon Hill and evolved eventually into a couple of different games that we will be talking about as we get to it. This is, of course, an all-time classic, and frankly, I think this is pretty playable even today. Maybe the graphics don't quite measure up to modern standards. They don't, but, you know, the counters are straightforward enough that I don't think it makes much difference. The map is a bit bland, as we say. This is, looks like somebody scanned this by hand from multiple copies of the map, but this is basically what the map looks like. There's not really a lot of terrain on here, but the really interesting thing that Third Reich does, and this is copied at some level by all of the other games on this list, is make the economics of World War II, the production of World War II, important to the game. It's not just Vicky, thanks for stopping by. And Eric the Mad Viking, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here live. Next week is the week folks want to be here live. If you got to pick a week, by the way, because we'll be giving away this bad boy. I will not yet reveal the contents of the box, as well as a couple other role-playing items. This is a wargaming product. So yes, with the BRPs, the basic resource points, I think, is what those stood for. And you basically had this not particularly complicated equation every quarter. You would, or was it annually? No, I think it was damn it, I don't even remember. I've actually never played the original Third Reich. I've played Advanced Third Reich, which isn't that different, so I should remember. But right now I've got World in Flames in my head, so that's why I'm probably not remembering it correctly. So, well, we'll all find out next week when I will have a stand-in for this fabulous product. So, best game Danny Secretary ever saw of Advanced Third Reich was England moved everything south and left London wide open, and Germany troops in there on turn one. The game is over. This I think highlights a situation that I think is probably worth a show of its own. So we're not really going to get into it tonight, which is wargamers' tendency to not finish the game, even to a logical conclusion point, or instead opting to bail at the first sign of woe. And I'm not a huge fan of that. I think you have to put yourself through some woe to really get into the game. And of course, these games can turn around. So actually, I have the severed head of Dan Pincaldi in this box, so you'll be receiving a very fragrant package, whoever wins it. So, yeah, it's about that size. This is true. So, classic game, Rise and Decline of the Third Reich. Take a quick look at the counters, too, and you can see that these counters are not complicated counters. There are numbers on the counters, but that doesn't really mean anything. The factors are really the only thing that matters. And here you have a movement and a combat factor. There's some interesting oddities to the system that are preserved, like the way breakthroughs work, that really are a little bit different from a lot of other games that handle this kind of topic, which are retained in its descendants. So, oh, well, okay. I mean, if you shame the dude into quitting, then that's different. But on the other hand, you probably shouldn't leave London undefended, even on turn one. I will not be doing that in World in Flames game in February. Now, the probably most obvious direct descendant, I say obvious, and it's not really, but it's obvious, is this game, John Prados's Third Reich. This was released in 2001 by Avalanche Press, and although BGG credits John Prados as co-designer on here, I feel like this is a game that is much more reminiscent of the design touches of both Avalanche Press and Brian Nipple, who is the other designer on this. This game, I have not played this. I can tell you that I think the map is unattractive, but this is a custom board that somebody made, and it's not bad. That is not the actual map. We have a picture of the actual map here. Here's the actual map, and I mean, it's not that bad, really. Except that the hex grid is like really glaringly obvious, and I don't like that. I don't really like the counters, but there's nothing really wrong with the physical presentation of this game that you couldn't get past if the game was good. I haven't played it. I hear it's not that good. If anybody has played it, I would be very interested in hearing their opinions of it. Numbers are for play by mail. That makes sense. I mean, there was a lot of that being supported back in the day. I don't know how much play by postal mail is really occurring nowadays, or even by email that isn't using a platform like Vassal or something like that. And therefore, I'm not sure that really means anything. But in the game, those numbers don't mean anything. They're just identifying numbers for the individual counters. So, all right. So burps. Oh yeah, everybody did this. Called them burps. All right. Mark Hodgkinson lost a good wargame player who refused to play again after, with 4th edition, the USA made Marines in Europe and invaded Denmark and walked to Berlin. I am interested in learning how exactly that occurred, but I'm not saying you got to post all that novel in the chat. So, yeah. So Steve Rochelle says that this particular game points to the era of graphic design where color and digital made things maybe not as attractive or as easy to play on as the original Third Reich map, which, whatever else you want to say about that original Third Reich map, there was never any question about losing units on the map or anything like that. I could see losing units on this map just visually, because there's really quite high saturation on both the map and the counters. And it's my personal feeling that you kind of want your high saturation to be on one or the other and not both. Traditionally, that's been the map for war games, but there's plenty of counterexamples of that. Now, this, of course, just covers Europe, but there is a Pacific version. And again, BGG, and I don't have this, haven't played it, don't know anything about it, called The Great Pacific War, also by Brian Nipple. And this is the same system moved to the Pacific. And as you can see, you've got just as handsome a visual look. Although I guess it might bother me more if the game maps were done in 2 completely different styles. How integrated these games are also is an open question that we will be asking again when we get to some other things here. Graphic design with Papyrus. I liked Papyrus when I first became aware of it, and then I started seeing it all over the place, so I decided I wasn't going to do it. Hilariously, the film Avatar, the one that made like $1.5 billion, used Papyrus in its subtitles. I wonder who came up with that brilliant idea. So, all right. So Adam Mystic says that BRP levels are the same as the classic game, but they added a lot of things that must be paid for in the AP game. Nowhere near the Avalanche Press one, but there's nowhere near enough BRPs to play all 4 turns of a year. So it is buckets of dice combat, which is not something I suppose readability wise, I agree with this. So I don't particularly have I think I talked about this sometime in the last couple of weeks, but I don't remember what show it was on, so I'll say it again. I think that I don't really have much of an issue with the buckets of dice combat system, as long as the number of dice that you are routinely being called upon to roll is kept to a modest number, say 10 or less or something like that. And I think that's probably going to be the case here. Maybe not, because I think you're rolling a die for every factor, so it would be fairly, if I'm right about that, and I might not be, then that would be fairly easy to say attack from 3 hexes with 8 strength points in each one, and you end up rolling 24 dice, and that's an awful lot of dice to roll. So I think it can become awkward in certain situations. From first principles, I do not have any issue with it at all. Comic Sans, yeah, okay. I mean, I've never really used a lot of Comic Sans personally. So Lorain County, Ohio, Thomas Bandy, sorry. So I have not been up there in a week or so, but it's pretty cold here. So I don't know. We actually had it in the low teens, I think last night or the night before, something like that, and it was pretty cold outside tonight, to be completely honest. Yeah, I see no particular. Oh, I gotta see this. I might need to see this. I have not seen this. I don't typically watch Saturday Night Live just because, frankly, it's usually not that funny. But sometimes it is, and then I'll go watch the clip on YouTube. So, all right. So, Darren Leveloff, thanks for stopping by. Has fussed with the Avalon game, had some charm with Beer and Pretzel's combat system, required a lot of space for the politics system. This is a space, like the politics of World War II is one of the spaces that Third Reich covers in the original Third Reich covers in what I took to be a pretty perfunctory manner. It does not go into a lot of detail on the politics. Not that anything says that it has to be honest. That is a design choice and not a problem as such. I have heard pretty good things about GDW's Pearl Harbor, actually. But as far as I know, they're not mateable, and as Panzer Division Lair points out here, and I'm not sure I'd want to. I mean, the scales are just vastly different. Some of these games are real. Well, we'll get to that when we get to other examples. So, all right. So, I cannot in good conscience leave this out. Axis and Allies. This is a 1981 release. The original release was from Nova. It did have counters instead of little plastic dudes. I have only played this in the original early 1980s Avalon Hill. I wish. Milton Bradley edition. This is, it's really not a bad game. I don't think it's particularly balanced, and I think it takes a lot longer to play than it does to arrive at the knowledge of who is actually going to win the game. And that's the biggest problem I have with it. That said, this thing is 40 plus years old, and I am reasonably confident that many adjustments have been made to it over the years since I have played it. So there's no real good reason for me to assume that that's still the case. That said, I am not scheduled to play in an Axis and Allies game anytime soon. But you can't really call it a bad game. You can absolutely call it, I think, a Beer and Pretzels game. Mark Hodgkinson mentions Axis Empires, which I think is another very good suggestion. And, stay tuned on that. So I hate this thing. By this thing, I mean the web browser, because it's Chromium based. That's really the problem. So there we go. So we'll be hitting that in a moment here. I would love to see some people playing big strategic level World War II games at Origins, by the way, but it never seems to happen if it's not Axis and Allies. So, all right. So just making sure I had that in there. All right. So Axis and Allies. This is a picture of the more recent edition of Axis and Allies. Like I said, the plastic pieces look slightly different, and other than that, I haven't played it. So I probably should, just for informational purposes, so I can not say, well, I didn't like it, but I haven't played it in 40 years. So, I mean, yes, this is true. This is kind of, if there was a movie about an hour and a half movie about all of World War II, it might look a lot like an Axis and Allies game. It's a little difficult, at least in the original game, to kind of replicate the ebb and flow of World War II, I think. But, I can't say this is a bad game. It is certainly a gateway game for wargaming that some people played as their first war game and subsequently started playing other war games. And that's great. I am happy about that. Is there a way I can fix this? Kind of. That sort of worked. Anyway. My screen ratios are not fantastic. Oh, there you go. Mark's grandson is getting his Axis and Allies stuff at some point. Yeah, I mean, it's a great entry point. It's a good game for younger players. It's not particularly complicated. We'll be talking about this, actually. This is on the list because it's a predecessor of this particular game. So moving on from Axis and Allies, we have the next evolution of Third Reich. This is a Bruce Harper design. It is Advanced Third Reich. It can be combined with this game, Empire of the Rising Sun, which covers the Pacific. These are what I would characterize as not totally integrated. You are, in some sense, playing the Pacific game on one table and the European game on another table. That, again, is not necessarily a problem, but the players handling factions that operate in both theaters, like the U.S. and the British, might feel their options to be somewhat restricted because their pieces will have to stay in one theater for the most part. I'm pretty sure there are rules for inter-theater transfer here, but I wouldn't say that the integration is great. Now, the other obstacle that is faced by Advanced Third Reich and Empire of the Rising Sun is that, and I've done a couple interviews with Bruce. Bruce is great, so check those out if you are interested. And I think the whole history of this particular game system is pretty interesting on its own. Catching up on the chat. Oh, and this is true. I'm only talking about the original Axis and Allies and its direct descendants that cover the same thing. There are a pile of additional Axis and Allies games covering things like Guadalcanal or the Battle of the Bulge or Axis and World War II with zombies. So, you know, the world's your oyster if you really love mixing and matching Axis and Allies games. So, well, yeah, Drew is one of those folks who is aware of this weird Spanish language novel. Actually, I have not read the novel. There is a novel about Third Reich, so it is a Spanish novel, and I think it might be called The Rise and Decline of the Third. No, that's probably not it. I forget that. History is the well, okay, this is fair. These are I've always felt, particularly for a game that is trying to cover both the European and Pacific theaters, that it's a very big design challenge to face when designing this kind of thing, because the two theaters, the war was fought in very different ways. The Pacific is predominantly a naval theater. There's a lot of naval factors that come up that just didn't come up at least often in the Atlantic War. And very few games, I think, have managed to, I would go so far as to say I'm not sure that any game has totally nailed having satisfying land and air combat in their strategic level World War II game. And in fact, there's a game on this list that doesn't even bother with the land combat, and it is not next, actually. So I do think these are worthwhile. They are. This is, what the hell is this? This is something somebody made, I'm pretty sure. This is the Africa Oriental thing. In case you want to handle 1936 or whatever it is in East Africa, it is 1936. Counters are almost, pixel by pixel identical, same type of deal. You'll notice they left the numbers off these. And here's where we get into the slightly more robust naval system, which is, I think, where Rising Sun in particular maybe doesn't do as well as I would like it to do. There is a very famous BGG session report. That is true, and doesn't say much about the actual game. And the third, I'd imagine the novel probably doesn't either. It is probably a novelty value thing. I mean, this is obviously true, right? There was no meaningful coordination between the European Axis and the Japanese, and not as much as you might think between Germany and Italy. But the Germans had technology that the Japanese didn't have, and the Japanese had technology that the Germans didn't have, and nothing ever got shared. So it was kind of a paper alliance because we're fighting the capitalist powers, and that was kind of it, because Japan is a long way away from Europe. So This is part of that challenge, actually, Brant, is the fact that the European theater covers a smaller number. I'm phrasing this in a specific way. The European map on any given World War II in Europe game covers fewer square miles than the Pacific map does for any given Pacific game. That covers the entire theater anyway. So I did not list War Room, but I would think, because I've seen it on a table. It looks cool. I've heard it's good, but I don't really know anything about it, so I left it off the list. So I think the novel was about Third Reich, not about a world at war, I think. But yeah, the scale is problematic, and then you have to figure out how to deal with that. And there have been a number of different approaches to do that. For example, in World at War, the units for the powers that operate in both theaters, which are the British, the Americans, and the Soviets, have different movement factors on the counters to reflect the fact that the PEXs in the Pacific map are bigger. That's not a perfect solution. World in Flames, on the other hand, makes the movement costs of the hexes different in the Pacific scale maps, which I think is also not entirely satisfying, but at least I became comfortable with it after a while. So, all right. All right, so Danny Secretary says War Room is a good game. A lot of dice, cool. Mark says they shared technology such as aircraft engine prototypes. They didn't share the Japanese didn't share the torpedoes, and the Germans didn't share the jets. But I mean, there was some cross pollination. But I wouldn't say it rose to the level of coordination. Justigard is playing War Room right now, and he says it's a ton of fun. So. So Brant says, does changing the map away from equitable hexes to varying size areas for movement make enough differences to solve the problem? I don't think it does. I have largely limited this list to games with hex maps because those tend to be the games that I have at least looked at. But there's certainly other examples. There's at least two games, including Axis and Allies, on this list that are area movement maps. I mean, in principle, I think maybe you could make this work, but what that looks like to me is large areas on the European map versus small areas on the Pacific map. And I'm not positive. I just don't know that anybody's tried to do it that way. Let me put it that way. See, this is one of the things that will tend to not happen in a game that is only covering the Pacific theater. But if it is a global war game, then I think you might see the Japanese attack the Soviets. I've certainly seen it happen in World in Flames. Usually the Soviets have to kind of leave themselves open for such a maneuver, or the Allies have to be doing fairly badly, or the Soviet Union has collapsed and Japan is just pretty much taking the territory. So. All right. So Michael Pratt, thanks for stopping by. Scaling between the European and Pacific maps was one of the things that frustrated their group when they played America in Flames back at Consum Expo 2023. I mean, were you playing like the whole war, starting in 1939, or later, or just playing the American Flames part of it? Because the action in American Flames, if you're just playing that, is going to be mostly on America's maps. I would think, at least early on. Then again, I don't know how far you got, so. So Mark says it doesn't make as much of an issue as he once thought, because in the end, the Axis are fighting in individual theaters. The U.S. is the major global actor. That's certainly true. And while the Commonwealth is very important in the European conflict, they are not as important in the Pacific conflict. It does depend on the strategic options that you have in the game. So, for example, is there a realistic, historically, was there a realistic shot of the Japanese making it to India? I'm not sure that's historically realistic, but in a number of these games, it might happen. So Michael Pratt was just playing American Flames, so I have not tried that. I'm not inclined to try that. Although I did purchase the maps by themselves just to have the Americas on the Pacific scale instead of the off-map hex scale. But I don't know that I think that the strength of World of Flames is in the post-war fantasy period either. So there's that. He says he felt like only a few hexes on the map mattered. Panama track, I can certainly see that Panama attracted most of the attention. I'm just sitting here right now. I got WIF set up back here, and the only thing I've really done so far is use colored cubes to set up convoy routes to figure out what optimal convoy routes look like. So Mark says that India is a legitimate Japanese objective, but the Germans weren't going to play. Yep. All right, so moving on from Advanced Third Reich and Rising Sun. Do I have a picture of the map here? Well, here's a picture of the whole game. I think these maps, while they're not like terrain heavy, they're a little terrain heavier than the classic Third Reich maps. And I think that's certainly justified in the Pacific theater. And I've always felt that these maps are fairly attractive maps. So take that for what it's worth. Here is a game that only covers, as far as I could tell anyway, I have not played this, but it's pretty recent release, just 2 years old, from GMT Seas of Thunder by Jeff, BGG credits Neil Sobolski, Jeff Horger, and Chuck Marr as the designers on this. And while the map looks awkward, I can 100% see the gameplay justification for making the projection unusual like this, because it is a naval game and not really the land war is, as far as I can tell, completely abstracted out of this. All the counters are naval related counters, and I've seen people playing this at conventions too, and it looks like an intriguing game. It does have half-inch counters. I think there's 5 half-inch counter sheets in this, and it's one mounted board, which you have to flip over at some point. I've been told that's not much of an inconvenience. It sounds like a big inconvenience to me, because you got to put the pieces back on the same places that they were on. So the map's weird, but I've heard good things about the game. I like Jeff as a designer, and I would actually kind of like to try this, although I do not own it. What I suspect that whoever did the map layout first, and I remember when Jeff was playtesting this at Buckeye Game Fest years ago, and the old map that was hand drawn looked like this too. I suspect that what we're trying to do with this map is kind of achieve an equal area projection, except for the sea areas instead of the land areas. But you've also got outliers like the Baltic and the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, where I think they're projected that way so you could fit pieces in those spaces. Mercator maps are not good maps for working on your wargame project unless it's set the game is set in Ecuador, I guess, or you're willing to work around some of those problems. But like an operational map is generally not going to use that projection. Frank Davis says, variable area size or ignoring non-critical geography is one possible solution to the scale discrepancy, but he recommends ignoring non-critical map locations even if the map is a state park. So this, I think, is a legitimate approach that, let's say you have a point-to-point map, right? Or an area map. I mean, they're not different technically. So I think you can absolutely achieve this effect, as Frank says, ignoring non-critical locations, right, and only showing kind of the passable areas that military forces actually moved along. That does make sense to me and has been used to good effect in any number of point-to-point games, like Paths of Glory, for example. Well, I guess they're also, the fact is that Mercator maps, the Mercator map projection was designed for ocean navigation, and it is very good for that. So there's that, but I don't know that means that it should have been the map that they showed everybody in grade school either. So, Alistair Logie, thank you for clicking the thumbs up button. Folks, don't forget to click the thumbs up button. So just covers a naval, but it looks pretty interesting. And I like the look of the counters too, to be honest. I don't know that you're going to be able to get a sense of that from BGG's scans. You can't. But it's an intriguing looking game. Now, here's something completely different on a very abstract level, but I think it's still a pretty solid game. Quartermaster General. There's a bunch of variants of this too, including a World War I variant that I'm told is very good. Kelvin Boy 224. That is Mr. Carl Fung. Carl, thanks for stopping by. I have played Quartermaster General a couple of times, and I have liked it a great deal. I think this is a five or six player game, and while you can like play it two-handed if you want, I think it's a far better game played as a multiplayer game. It doesn't take too long to play. 3-4 hours, I think, is a reasonable amount of time to play this in. Considering that we got almost an entire game in, and nobody at my table the first time I played it knew what they were doing, including myself. It's quite abstract. It will remind you of both risk and diplomacy, actually. And I don't mean the diplomacy part of diplomacy. I actually mean the mechanical part of diplomacy. You know, the part you put on an index card. It actually functions kind of that way, where if you cut stuff off, it's hugely problematic. So it is all about maintaining your lines of supply and communication. And I think it does exceptionally well at representing that at this scale. Obviously, it's a very low granularity map, but nevertheless, I think this is a very solid game. I mean, this could look really cool, I'll tell you that. And Velcro push pins. I mean, there's a number, or magnets. A number of suggestions present themselves for this novel concept of playing on an actual globe. It's a cool idea. One game that's not on the list because I didn't think about it, but I'm going to talk about it right now, is Absolute Victory from Compass. That is a Ben Madison and I believe Wes Ernie design. Same team that did Death in the Trenches, as I recall. And I would think it would be pretty big, but it would be cooler too. I mean, if you're going to make it cool, you might as well make it cool. You might as well make the globe like 8 feet across, right? And then you get like ladders to go up and move units in the Soviet Union, for example. Or you could probably just do the Northern Hemisphere and be fine. I have not even looked at the new Hearts of Iron board game because I don't like the new Hearts of Iron video game. I like the last one better. So Marty hated Quartermaster General. He says, get 3 cards, almost always one obvious play. Dull. I don't know. I thought the interaction was pretty good. I thought the ramifications of the strategy and the strategic choices were interesting. I liked Quartermaster General quite a bit. I don't own it. I would be happy to play it again at some point should the opportunity present itself. And it's wooden blocks and stuff like that. And you've got like land units and sea units, and that's it. It's very abstract. That's again not a problem. Perry Sparopoulos, thanks for stopping by. All right. Next up, we have Ernie Copley's duo, The War Europe and The War the Pacific. I have played The War Europe. I have not played The War Pacific. And this is another case in which you are really kind of playing 2 separate games at the same time. One on the European map and one on the Pacific map. I played the Soviets. I got my ass handed to me, but that is not a particular surprise. I think this is another descendant, another answer, if you will, to Third Reich. And I think it's a very good one. I think it does some of the enhancement that we got in Advanced Third Reich and later in A World at War. But at the same time, it simplifies a number of things that are really kind of burdensome to handle in Third Reich, or at least in A World at War, and I guess in Advanced Third Reich too. And I'm talking specifically about like the national air, sea, and land proficiency levels. This is a much more elegant and easier to manage way to handle that than is done in A World at War, in my opinion. And I don't know that I think you're really losing a significant amount of interesting detail with that abstraction, at least for that particular mechanic. Solid game, in my opinion. I've got this. I will be happy to play this again, and I would, of course, like to play at some point The War of the Pacific. There is an expansion kit that released for The War Europe. And I do have it. I got one of the last copies from Compass at Compass Expo. And this is a very interesting game series, if you will. I don't know if Ernie really plans to return to this or not. When I talked to him, which was the year I played the War Europe, there was a game of the War Pacific occurring on the next table over, but I don't know that I got much. I didn't pay as much attention to that. I was worried about the Germans kicking my ass over on my side. So, all right. I have heard very good things about the World War I Quartermaster General, but I haven't played any of them. I've only played the World War II one. Brant points out that we had an oversized Quartermaster General game at Origins last year, and I've seen that before too elsewhere. Giant markers, same size cards. I mean, it would be funny if the cards were like this 8.5 by 11. That would be amusing. Doug from the Tabletop's Edge says he likes Axis Empires quite a bit, but WIF is the only grand strategic game that has really fully integrated the European Asian theaters in a workable and fun way. I think I would probably be a little less strong in my statement about it, but I do think that WIF has done the best job of integrating the European and Asian theater. Mr. John Madison is also here. John, thanks for stopping by. Yes. 90 to 3,000 minutes. I think this is probably a 20 to 30 hour game, the War Europe at least. I can tell you that the Pacific game went much faster. It could be my fault. I don't know. The Pacific game went much faster than the European game on our tables when we ran the whole thing together a few years back. Again, the map, I think these are Mark Mahaffey maps. I like these maps. They absolutely look like Mark Mahaffey maps. The map actually reminds me of the map for Balance of Powers, which has a Mahaffey map that game has some map issues with clarity and legibility, in my opinion. But I have not observed that was a problem in these games of the war. If I have a problem with this game, it is a stupid problem. And what I mean is that you cannot search Board Game Geek for the war. You will get thousands of hits, and this will not be one of the top ones. You have to search for the War Europe or the War of the Pacific if these are what you want to find, which is why I have these bookmarked on BGG, because I don't want to have to search for them again. So, there will surely be content in some capacity arising from our February game of World in Flames. So stay tuned for that. I've also done a couple other videos on World in Flames, but the person who's probably, and by probably I mean undoubtedly, done the best content on World in Flames is Doug over at the Tabletop's Edge, who has a tutorial series and a couple of different playthrough series, actually. Totally worth your time. I won't tell you that that it isn't expensive. I will tell you that if you buy the classic edition from Noble Knight, it's something like $125 or something like that. It could be more. I don't know. At this point, but it really seems like a fairly reasonable price for the amount and quality of components that you are getting. And Noble Knight does have the 2024 release as well. So they redid, it's basically a second printing with some errata incorporated. That's basically all the 2024 version is. So I did not feel that I needed to obtain it for myself. BGG search engine is not the greatest. I have seen worse too. The worst one, unfortunately, is the one that's really kind of sticking in my craw right now. It is the Nobara package manager search function, which is just balls on toast. It is terrible. As Perfidious Albion mentions, so there are two different versions of WIF available in print at the moment. There's the classic, and they're both collector's editions. Okay, so there's collector's edition classic, which is the core game, but the rules are all there. You don't need additional rules. And then deluxe is just the core game with the four expansions added into it. The rule books, all the other components are exactly the same. I bought the classic. When I bought it, I got spooked by the big price too, because it was at the time I was looking at it in Australian dollars, and it's even scarier in Australian dollars. But then you run the currency conversion, and it's not as rosy for Americans now, or people spending American dollars, as it was at the time. But it worked out that the classic only cost me like $110 $20 or something like that. And that seems insanely cheap considering that it's like a 12 by 12 by 5-inch box, comes with 4 mounted boards, comes with a turn record track and production board that is also mounted. And if you get the deluxe edition, you also get the ship board, like the task force board, as well, which is also mounted. So, but you can totally play a great game of World in Flames with just the classic. That said, there are optional rules that I would still strongly recommend that you use. So what I did was I bought the classic and then I bought the other pieces, a couple pieces at a time, direct from ADG, which eventually ended up including the Millennium Annual, which has some things that I wanted to see in it, even if they are not quite up to date with the collector's edition. I picked up Days of Decision 3, which is still the current version of Days of Decision. I picked up the America in Flames maps, but I did not get the America in Flames game, and it is, even though I had it back in the day and got rid of it. We got another one, another ugly little dog ear. I do think that if you are going to be serious at any level on World in Flames, you do want the expansions, but there is also a deluxe expansion pack that if you have the classic, you can get the deluxe expansion pack. And I don't remember what that cost. But I believe it has been. I haven't looked for it lately, so I don't know that it's in stock at Noble Knight at this exact moment, but it is. It has been in stock at Noble Knight in the past. All right, so Christoph de Klerk says that the picture used on this game, The War of Europe, is probably one of the first pictures that has been edited. The Russian soldier had multiple watches on his wrist taken that didn't match. Yeah, I think the original photo that this is from is them raising the Soviet flag over the Reichstag in 1945, I think. So Doug says, once you go deluxe, you never go back. And I do think that unless I were running like an instructional game for new players or something like that, that I would want to play with most of what the expansions provide you with is additional counters. Okay. So if you want to play with all the ships instead of just some of the ships, where the counters represent multiple ships, you want a counter for every ship, then you want to play with Ships in Flames. And that completely replaces the classic ships, except for like the convoys, amphibs, and subs, which you add to the original counter mix, the additional ones you get in Ships in Flames. Whereas Planes in Flames adds more planes. I think that the counters for the pilot rule is in Planes in Flames 2, but you don't have to play the pilot rule with the Planes in Flames counters. You could play just one if you wanted to. I don't know why you would, but beyond that, all Planes in Flames really does is provide you with a lot more air counters that you can potentially buy. So it should be. I mean, the stuff wise, it is about this. It is the same stuff as Classic Plus Deluxe. So that is absolutely true. So there are 3 really separate, I guess let's move on to World in Flames since we're talking about that. There are 2 separate, I agree with Doug. I think you should play with the pilots, but there's nothing that says you have to. I like to play with the pilots personally. I think it adds strategic decisions of interest to the game. Which not all the options, I don't think all of the options do. Some of the options seem like they're just add paperwork. So there's no expectation you're going to play with all the options. I think almost nobody does. So, all right. So there are, Perigi says it's the Spirit Airlines simulator. So there are 3 separate games that can be tacked into a World in Flames game. The first, Days of Decision, which is the first of them to be released chronologically, is the political game that starts in 1936. And it has some really interesting things going for it. And I frankly just don't think it works mechanically with the current version of World in Flames for the same reason that somebody pointed out earlier in the show here. that there are problems with John Prados' Third Reich, because it adds things that you have to pay for, but doesn't give you anything else to pay for them with. And I'm talking about the political options. And I think you end up, if you play through that, having seen it a couple of times, you end up somewhat undergeared when the actual war starts, unless it starts quite late. And I have seen more Days of Decision integrated with whiff games where the war starts early than starts late. So you do no. This is true. So there is like a pilot. A pilot is a unit just like the planes are. The plane is not one plane. The plane is like 100 planes or 500 planes, or whatever the number is. There's a pilot for every plane, but you have like pilot points. And if your plane gets shot down over friendly territory, then there's a pretty good chance you'll recover the pilot, and then not have to build it or train a new pilot. Whereas if it is shot down over enemy territory, like the large amount of enemy territory to be found in the Soviet Union, then there's a lower chance that the pilot will be recovered, and that he is going to spend the rest of his days in the Soviet gulag, and you got to buy him another pilot to replace him. So you are buying one pilot per air counter that you actually have on the map, and until you add the pilot to the plane doesn't enter the map. It sits in the reserve pool. All right, so I'll get to your question in a second. All right, so let's get to Frank now. All right, so Frank says, please explain the estimated whiff playing time, 120 to 4,800 minutes. He only has 3,800 minutes left. So I would like to start this conversation by pointing out that the number of playing time minutes listed on Board Game Geek is a complete farce. These do not necessarily, I'm sure in some cases they do, but in some cases these are just wild ballpark guesses. I would estimate that a game of World in Flames Classic, you're not playing with like tons and tons and tons of extra stuff or something like that, is probably going to take you about, I'd say, a minimum of 100 hours to play. A minimum of 50 hours, probably leaning more into 100 hours. And 100 hours would be 6,000, right? Yeah, 6,000 minutes, not 4,800 minutes. So this is, I don't know where whoever filled this out on BGG got that number from. Now, the 120-minute number is also somewhat fanciful because, to be frank, even if you are playing, so if I'm going to play, say, France 1940, okay, the France 1940 scenario of World in Flames, which is a relatively small scenario, you can do that, not a problem, but you are probably going to spend as much time setting it up as you are actually playing the scenario. And the reason for that is is because of the way World in Flames handles unit purchasing. So you have let's just take an obvious example, infantry units. Okay, so these are infantry units. On the back of the counter, there will be an infantry symbol, a cost, and an amount of time that it will spend on the production spiral. When you build it, you will put it on the production spiral. I think infantry is 3 turns ahead. So in 3 turns later, it will actually show up on the map as a reinforcement. So it takes time to build the units. Okay, so far so good. The problem is that the units are not all the same. Okay, there aren't cookie cutter units in World in Flames. All the units are different, and you are going to pick one randomly from a cup based on its unit type, which means that you need a cup for German infantry units. You need a cup for German army units, a cup for German paratroopers, a cup for German cruisers, a cup for German heavy cruisers. So you need like a lot of cups, and just like sorting all that out, unless you have your game organized that way, and I don't, it really takes a long time. So this is I think a significant downside of whiff, and a significant disincentive to playing the scenarios. I mean, if I'm going to spend 20 man hours setting this thing up, and that's probably a bit high of an estimate, but if you should watch Doug's tutorial series, because he actually talks about how to organize your counters, so it's a little less of an obstacle to set them up when you need to. I have actually pulled all of the like initial Global War setup counters out already, so they're like, did I do that? I did it for the British because I'm playing the British. I'll do it for the rest of them too because we're playing with my set. So that way, like, because the ships are the only like named units, everything else is just picked randomly from a cup. But the ships, you'll pick like a specific ship. Bismarck, for example, will show up in September, October 1939 on the production spiral, and it'll show up in a couple of months. So I will talk about this when we get to Axis Empires. This is Doug is not 100% off base with this, to be completely honest. If you don't know what you're doing and are kind of picking your way through the counters individually and not in a systematic way, then I think you could take a long time setting World in Flames up. You really can. So World in Flames does indeed ignore this. So one of the reasons I picked up the Millennium Annual is for one of the old expansion things, Politics in Flames. Now, this isn't, in principle, this is not collector's edition compatible, but I think you could probably monkey with it. It's basically the same political system that was used in Fatal Alliances, which is the World War I iteration of World in Flames, which I also think is a really good game, by the way. And if we weren't playing that, I'd be pitching Fatal Alliances. And I think that is actually a more workable political system than the one in Days of Decision in some ways. But I mean, Jeff is right that this is not a political decision in WIF. This is a military decision. It is a strategic decision as to where you're going to send the good aircraft. So, I mean, if I was, hey, I'm playing the British, I'm like, no, I probably won't want to send my good aircraft to North Africa. I might want my good aircraft protecting the UK instead. So, but we'll see how that works out. That is, plenty of room to actually play the game when we're playing the game. I mean, I guess this is true, but then you're playing with the wrong people, is all I got to say. I have total confidence in everybody that's playing in our game, fortunately. So with 4,800 counters, to be completely honest, I had this flat bead tray solution where I had all the counters in 5 bead trays, and I did a video on this, so check that video out. But the fact is, you're not putting these all back in the box, for one thing. And the tray configuration does not really give you the level of flexibility that you would really want. Ideally, what you would want to sort World in Flames optimally is there would be a baggie that would have one force pool type and 1 year in it. Every year at the beginning of the year, you will add the year's new units, and new units can come in. And that's how World in Flames kind of handles the technological advances that happened in World War II. There's a lot of reasons why the British would sure like to hang on to Singapore, I got to tell you. So I've seen like friggin' dressers, like converted dressers to store ASL stuff at Oktoberfest a few years ago. So there are, I think the World in Flames, the classic cost about $150 at Noble Knight. I think the deluxe cost about $240 at Noble Knight, something like that. Again, you can check these prices. But you do get like, I don't know, 6,000 counters or something like that if you buy the deluxe. And the basic game has quite a few counters on its own. So the counters are 1/2-inch counters, Perisporopolis. There is. So ideally, you would end up, and I did the math on this. It's like, okay, so if I have a baggie for every force pool and a baggie for every year, so I would have like a 1939 infantry, 1940 infantry, 1941 infantry, so on and so forth for the Germans, for example. I would need like many hundreds of baggies. And at that point, you got to think about, I'm going to lose space just for the amount of plastic I'm including. Right. So what I got is annual force pools. So like, here's the German 1945 units. Boom. Here you go, Germany. Figure it out. We'll be talking about advanced ETO and PTO momentarily. Although I didn't pull up, I'll talk about them anyway. I have them both, but I have not played them. Again, we'll talk about that in a minute. People have come up with some really clever and ingenious storage solutions for ASL. This is absolutely true. There isn't Alistair Logie, but I would probably have bought it if there was. So, Noble Knight Games, to answer Christophe de Klerk. I assume that's the NKG that we're talking about. Yes, you will absolutely see a winner. I imagine that was in evidence at Winter Offensive 2, but I paid less attention to that because I was playing something and it wasn't ASL. Yes, and these do go. I think they might still have these. It's a physical item, okay, that you get them from Matrix Games, and I was sent a copy. Thank you. You know who you are. And it's the entire planet at the European scale, and it is, as I recall, well over 10 feet long. I think it's like 18 feet long. It's crazy. So, very good. Well, we will get to that. What time is it? 9:05. Yeah, okay. Let's hear from Noble Knight, and I will try and catch up a little bit on the chat. So, the counter clipping show is, dang it, is hereby sponsored by Noble Knight Games, the fine folks over there. So we will hand it off to them for 30 seconds. We'll be right back.
Here at Noble Knight Games, we've been carefully growing the world's largest selection of board games, role-playing games and dice, war games, miniatures and paints, card games, and more. Going on 25 years now. Our rustic castle contains more game and hobby goodness than you can shake a stick at. Complete with careful packaging and the finest customer service the land can provide. You can buy, sell, trade from anywhere in the world, just like nature intended. Noble Knight Games.
All right, big shout out to our good friends at Noble Knight, and don't forget to use the affiliate link in the video description. If you're buying stuff that you were going to buy anyway, you might as well help the channel out a little bit. I get a little bit of kickback in the form of store credit. So Doug uses baggies, and he's done a video on this. And I am, at this time, I am also using baggies. My organization is slightly more granular than Doug's, but not by much. I've just broken out the nationalities for the different years. As opposed to putting like all the Axis in one for 40 in one bag and all the allies in another bag. I think it's just a little easier if you have a multiplayer game going on, which is what we're doing, and which is kind of my preference. I mean, we've talked about this a lot over the last couple of years, and I do feel like 5 players is probably the optimal number of players for World in Flames. You can absolutely play it with less, but your game is going to slow down. And I felt that in this context of playing it at a convention, we really wanted 5 so that we could actually make good progress in the game. So it is quite important to me, Jonathan Dyer, to get all game components in the original box. I have gone to great lengths to do that for many, many, many games. World in Flames was one that I just couldn't manage it with, but I'm pretty sure I can get all the baggies in the box at this point. So. Who's playing? John Madison, Doug, Mike, Dave, and not Dave Minery, the other Dave, and Nick, who was playing with us on GTS Utah Beach last year. Dave was there too. He was playing Lava Tie with Dennis and those guys. So I prefer trays. I for most purposes, I prefer trays. I am willing to make concessions to baggies where baggies make more sense. No, not that Dave either. We know a lot of Daves. So what can I say? If you buy World in Flames Deluxe, no, I don't think you need to buy anything else. I wouldn't buy. I would advise against buying Days of Decision because I don't think the integration into Collector's Edition works particularly well. And frankly, I don't think that you are well served by playing with the Days of Decision rules, because I think it creates problems for the whiff game when you move to whiff. All right, and Brant suggests that we should hold Winterfest at Wake Forest so that we can play whiff during whiff at whiff. So that's cute. Yeah, so I have a 3D printed counter tray solution for Fed and Empire that I didn't print. I bought them off of Etsy. I'll do a video on those as well at some point. Yes, you could absolutely fit it all in the, not in my trays. Trays, no, I don't think so. I mean, maybe I didn't try that, but yes, the maps are all mounted. If you switch to paper maps, and I think you can buy the paper maps, you will find that you have a lot more room to play with in the box. But at this point, I'm not convinced that I need that. I will find out when I pack the game up for travel to Winterfest. Now, until then, it's on my table with stuff on it, and I don't want no counters, but there's little blocks so I can figure out where the British convoys are going. If you wanted to go to Winterfest, so winterfestwargamers.com, there was also a Facebook group. I would post in one of those places, to be honest. Chances are fairly good. So Winterfest is a big game focused event, so bear that in mind. That's not to say there aren't smaller games happening there. There almost always are. But the main event is definitely big monster games. So if that's something you're into, then I think Winterfest is an event that you should be investigating. I think the chances are really good that you will find something to do. Let me put it that way. So, but I would not necessarily plan a trip and a hotel stay based on my saying you probably will. I would want that nailed down before making those plans. So I would say go to the forum. The winterfestwargamers.com is good for like information. Go to the Facebook group is my advice. Actually, then people will like respond to you. It won't be me because I'm pretty much not doing Facebook at this point. All right, so let's move on from World in Flames, because otherwise I'm going to talk about that for the next 50 minutes, and then this will be the World in Flames show instead. So in 1973, Jim Dunnigan designed and released through SPI this game, World War II, European Theater of Operations. This is a quite high level and fairly abstract looking game. There is, as you can see, not a lot of map detail, but it's not that dissimilar from the original Third Reich in that respect. I think you start, I mean, once you're into the campaign, I think we're playing with a bunch of the options. Let me put it that way, but not all of them. Nobody plays with all the options. That's crazy. Some of the options strike me as options I would never want to play with. And other of the options strike me as options I would always want to play with. You do get to pick and choose amongst the optional rules. All right, so there's a sort of an interesting history that's not entirely clear to me going on with this game. So 1973, this game comes out. World War II European Theater of Operations. It's a Dunnigan design. And we cannot trust Board Game Geek to, I wish there was a War Game Geek. That would be cool. Somebody should do that, Board Game Geek. It doesn't really say re-implements or re-implemented why. Yeah, I mean, so this, I'm not sure I've really talked to very many people that have played this. I have seen it in the flat, and I think they did do a boxed version of it too, but I might be misremembering that. Where this begins to become interesting is when SPI is acquired by TSR. And this gets this entire thing. There's an intermediate version, this thing right here, which is released by Spitzer. Okay, but then a couple of years later, this deluxe edition comes out. This deluxe European Theater of Operations game, accompanied by a Pacific Theater of Operations version to cover the Pacific. And these are Douglas Niles' designs. Now, Mr. Niles is far more known for his contributions in role-playing games. He did a bunch of the D&D stuff. He wrote, I think, might have been even the first Forgotten Realms novel to be released. And it was probably the first one I read. And of the first two Forgotten Realms novels that I read, I haven't read that many of them. This was back in the day. It's probably the better of the two. Dark Walker on Moonshae is the name, and that's like his campaign setting. I've always felt like these two games have a lot of potential and a lot to recommend them. I'm not sure. I wasn't sure if I was right that Dark Walker on Moonshae was released before Ed Greenwood's novel, but that was my recollection. I certainly read it before Ed Greenwood's first novel, which I didn't think was that good. I think Ed has come a little ways, actually. So I will agree with Doug here. And again, the optional rules are all in the game, regardless of whether you have the expansions or not. And a lot of those options you can just play with, and you don't need the expansions to do that. You don't need the expansions to play with, even with pilots, because the rules are in there. You just have to make up markers for the pilots. But that's just like here's how many pilots I have that moves up and down the general records track. So that's not hard. Do we have there's sort of an interesting map style here where we have these sort of unusual borders on the map, but the turn structure is not quite symmetrical. It's pretty interesting. You have like more turns in the summer than you do in the winter. I think that's interesting. There's all kinds of there's an interesting activation mechanic to activate the military units. I think this series does have a lot of potential. Now, considerably later on, if we go back here, we're going to find that this was re-implemented by Advanced European Theater of Operations, and this is an Eric Harvey design. Pacific Theater was also upgraded or reissued as well. These games add a considerable amount of complexity, especially in the Pacific, where you get a lot more naval stuff, to the Spitzer games. I will say, these look quite interesting. I actually want to play these too. The Pacific one looks fairly intimidating. You could see that the maps are not quite done in the same style, but you've still got those sort of double thick border, that double thick border effect. It's just a little less than it was in the Spitzer versions. These games look very interesting, and I'd like to play them. I have them both at this point. You can probably still get the Advanced Pacific Theater of Operations, but the European Theater game has been out of print for a long time, and it's quite hard to get, and it's quite expensive. We did a campaign for it not that long ago through Noble Knight. So super interesting games. If we look at the Pacific Theater game, I'm not sure how much it's going to tell us, but man, there's a lot of paper in this thing. Again, this is the typical Decision Games terrible quality screenshot, but here's the whole thing. This includes, there's an expansion for this too, which adds East Africa as well as India. What we see over here is the India map from the expansion. You don't have to play with that. You can just leave it off. So Meandering Mike says that the Doug Niles game is much superior to the Dunnigan design. And I don't, I haven't played the Dunnigan design. I have looked fairly closely at, no, I think we're all in agreement on this too. I just wasn't sure because it would have made sense if Ed Greenwood's novel was first, right? But then I'm like remembering, wasn't the Dark Walker on Moonshape first? There were some interesting things in Dark Walker on Moonshape. It's not a bad book. Eric Goebel says PTO is one of his favorite games. Very interesting. Very interesting. And Mark Ruggiero was a huge fan of these too. So for me, at least, Mark's opinion on these, I am aware of, individual tastes, and that was Mark's taste, and cool. I might not like it as much, but, it gets a couple extra points toward me trying it if Mark liked it too, because we did have a considerable amount of overlap in our tastes. So Doug Niles wrote a very charming introduction to the advanced versions that was published by Decision. So there's that too. And he was expressed his delight that, somebody was still carrying the banner on this. Well, yeah, it's the same Mediterranean. I don't know off the top of my head who did the maps for these. Does BGG list somebody? It says Eric Harvey, so maybe Eric Harvey did the maps himself. I don't know. They don't look like Joe Youst maps to me, though. So there's that. And as I think we talked about last night, I think there's about a 50-50 chance if you pick any decision game from any period at random that the map is by Joe Youst, because he's done a lot of work with Decision for maps and design work too. But boy, he's done a lot of maps. So you can see some very nice stack of ships happening here. There are tons of off-map displays, so this is kind of a stunt move here, is putting all these in. Or maybe this is the setup, and they're going to move all this stuff off to a task force display at a later time. Oh, nice. Mike ended up with Mark's copy of Advanced ETO, bought in the fundraising auction. Excellent. I think I remember you picking this up, actually, because I was monitoring it at the time. I think by that time I may or may not have already acquired it. Yeah, they are both. They're the TSR versions. So if you don't have the stomach for either the substantial increase in complexity of the advanced versions, or the hassle of running down an expensive out-of-print game in the case of the European Theater, you can get the TSR versions. That is this game this is Europe, and then the Pacific version, you can get those relatively inexpensively. And I will mention that the Armchair Dragoons digital convention begins on, I think, January 16th. That is correct, and runs through the 18th. And I'll be doing some shows with those folks. Go ahead and head over to, and event registration is open too. So go ahead and head over to armchairdragoons.com and check all that out. So Brant, thanks for stopping by. 1 hour World War II, no, it wouldn't. And in fact, Paulo Mori's Blitzkrieg isn't going to show up here either. But I don't really know a ton about either game, to be honest. Although I've heard some good things about both games, actually, to be honest. I've watched some video. There is some video on Paulo Mori's Blitzkrieg, and it's an interesting game. But I mean, putting it in with these is a bit of an apples and oranges type of deal, in my opinion. Let me put it that way. Oh, very interesting. Is this available for download somewhere, Darren Leveloff, like on Consum World or a BGG or something like that? Because I would 100% jump on that if that's the case. I am not afraid to print out my own rule books. By the way, I finally got the printer working. I was a bit trepidatious about installing the HP printers are notoriously problematic with Linux. It was as simple as plugging it in. I plugged it in, it picked it up, and that was that. And I had no other issues and immediately started printing things. So I will need some new toner cartridges very soon, though. And they're relatively expensive. So I would agree with this. I do not know how those work, so I am going to hold off any comment on those. I think there's a chance that this could be tasteless, but on the other hand, I have some confidence that the designer maybe had some sense and didn't make it tasteless. So, all right. So moving on to our penultimate, I guess it is our penultimate title now, World at War. This is the ultimate modern evolution of the Third Reich system. And Bruce Harper is once again the man in charge of this project. And Bruce has done a very good job of continuing to offer support. He's got a YouTube channel with some, I think, useful YouTube videos explaining various features of World at War. This is quite popular. It was reprinted by GMT, even though it didn't have anything like the required number of P500 orders. So they must be very confident that that this game is going to sell. There's a big tournament that runs at WBC every year that looks great. And for a long time, it was like, well, if I ever go to WBC, I'm probably going to play that. And now I've been there twice, but admittedly, I wasn't there for the whole time. I was just there for like a day. So there's that. So this is probably what most of us would want to play now if we want to have the Third Reich experience, I think, unless you're consciously just making like a retro decision where you've decided you want to play the original to see how it is. Which I would actually like to do, and which might happen, but it won't happen before February, I can tell you that. The detail level here is fairly high, but as Bruce himself has pointed out on any number of occasions, a lot of the basic mechanics are, in fact, really all of the basic mechanics are not really that complicated on their own, but there's a lot of special situational rules that you probably don't need to memorize, but you should have a vague idea of how they work so that you don't get caught pants down when Pearl Harbor happens, for example. There is also a pre-war political game for this called Gathering Storm, and then there's a companion Pacific game called Storm Over Asia. I have not played with those. I have spoken to people who have played them. The rule book is challenging. You will probably need to be looking, if you're trying to set up Gathering Storm, you probably need to be looking at BGG for the setup guide that somebody was kind enough to make. That will help quite a bit. It's also, I really do want to play these at some point, a Gathering Storm and Storm Over Asia, but I don't know. So, I mean, yes, this is, Mike Reed, this is essentially correct. This is the evolution of in a direct line from John Prados in 1974 to Bruce Harper in 2025, right? It is very much a later edition of the original Third Reich. I do think this is a very strong game. I think it has a lot to offer. One of the things that a World at War does that really relatively few of these other games that we've talked about tonight do is to simulate technological development during the course of the war as well. It does this with a kind of Baroque technology system, much of which is like a series of tables. I will, and it did earlier, express preference for certain aspects of that technology system to be boiled down into a much simpler and easier to deal with mechanism, like the war Europe does, for example, where you have like a national air proficiency, right? Which say I don't remember off the top. So let's say naval proficiency, because I know what that is. So the British have are a first class naval power at the beginning of the war throughout the entire course of the war. The Soviets are a third class land power at the beginning of the war, and you will spend production points to increase those numbers, which do make differences in the combat system. And you're tracking 3 different numbers for each major power: air, land, and naval, and different powers start in different places depending on who you're playing. So I'm kind of doing that a little bit right now. I don't consider myself to have played enough. Well, I haven't played a World at War. I've only played Advanced Third Reich. Nevertheless, I mean, you can definitely see the lineage between, Advanced Third Reich and that's been a long time, actually. So I don't trust my memories on any of this. But what I will say is that where World in Flames handles technology during the war, as just every year you add new updated units to the force pools, and you, the player, have the ability to obsolete out old units if you don't want to have to draw those out of the cup anymore. Whereas in a World at War, you actually are spending research points, and you're deciding where the research points goes into new jet engines or atom bombs or V weapons or whatever it is. And you've got a lot of power to guide your nation's technological development. And I do think that is pretty cool. I will tell you, it looks like a large hassle to build the atomic bomb, as kind of it probably should be, right? So I just got a pop in from something. I don't know what it was. So I guess we'll ignore it for now. I'm not quite up on what all the notification sounds mean on Linux yet. Let me put it that way. So I do think that I think the playtime is comparable. The footprint is comparable. WIF will take a little more room than a World at War will, but like the basic map size, here's the Europe map, here's the Pacific map, is identical. But you'll have you got to figure out a place to put the cups and the production spiral and all that other stuff in World of Flames. But in World at War, you've got to figure out where to put all the force pools, for example. So let's see. I do agree with Mike Reed on this point, is that I don't know that I think that a World at War is particularly guilty of this, though. I think there's a lot of different things you can do and explore in the technology system for a World at War that just besides building A-bombs and V-weapons and stuff like that. You could improve jets. One of the things you'll do is do the equivalent of those national air proficiency modifiers that the war just boils down to. There's first rank, second rank, and third rank nations in these particular areas. I think in either case, Vincenzo, I think that it is meaningful to make the comparisons. And at some point, I would like to do a detailed comparison video between these 3 games, which I think are kind of the banner bearers of strategic level World War II at the moment, at least as far as like the really highly groggy hex encounter games that are going to take you somewhere north of 50 hours to play. And of course, the last one of those is Axis Empires. Now, this has a bit of a storied history as well. It was originally released as Krieg by Decision Games, and did some interesting things with adding cards to the World War II hex encounter game. I didn't ever have the original Krieg game, but I did have Totaler Krieg when it released. And that was the second edition, which makes, I believe, this current edition, which is quite expensive, but you also get a crap ton of stuff in it. And I think it's an incredibly solid game, to be completely honest. It will, once you get the hang of it, and that is not necessarily incredibly trivial. I do think it plays faster than either World at War or World in Flames. It also covers at least if you buy this edition, it also covers the entire war. So there's the original Krieg, there's the update Totaler Krieg, there's the additional update Totaler Krieg, which was Totaler Krieg Axis Empires, and then was Axis Empires Totaler Krieg, and then Axis Empires Daisenso, which was the Pacific. That was the previous edition. This integrates both of those games into one enormous 3-inch flat box. It's a huge box. I managed to get all the counters into like 3 GMT counter trays, however. Well, when it's on sale at this point, I pre-ordered this actually. When it's on sale is the time to get this, because it is expensive. It's like, is it $250 or something like that? It's expensive, but you also get a huge amount of material in it. You get, I don't know what it is, 7 or 8 counter sheets. You get all these different cards. You get a bunch of player aids, and you get 4 maps that together cover Europe and the Pacific. And I think it's really solid. I will tell you that I don't think that Daisenso, that like the Pacific side of it, is quite as much fun as the European side, in part because of the way that the naval and air work in Europe. And if you're just like moving that over to the Pacific, I think it's less interesting. However, this new edition contains like a mini expansion. It's not really that mini. Contains an expansion called Schiffskrieg, which you can play with if you want. That makes the actual locations of the naval and air assets much more important. And I would be inclined to play with that if I were playing the Pacific side personally. So, John, thanks for stopping by. The Totaler Krieg is still real solid. The last edition of this was very solid, but I got rid of them because this was coming out. So now I have this, and we have also got an interview with Thomas Prowl, who is kind of the lead designer on this. Alan Emmerich. So the last 2-volume edition was a 3-way design effort by Thomas Prowl, Alan Emmerich, and Salvatore Vasta, who is also the designer of Unconditional Surrender. And you can see Axis Empire's DNA in Unconditional Surrender too, in my opinion. Of course, Alan Emmerich is not with us anymore. We were all taken aback by his passing. But real solid game. The components the components in the new one are really nice. This looks like the new map to me. It ought to be. And I organized everything by card of entry. So you'll, like, as the Germans, the way the cards work, it's not a card driven game in any conventional sense. What it is that the cards represent basically strategic decisions. The cards say, we are going to make an effort to invade the Soviet Union. So you'll play a card for that, and it will give you these units that you will then add to your force pools. Whereas if you play the other card that I'm going to do Operation Sea Lion, you get a bunch of different units. And that's one example of these sort of decision places that you will find throughout sort of the tree of card play that you have for all the major powers here. I think that 5 players also works best for this game, but it's a little different because instead of saying our 5 players are looking like the Commonwealth, the USA and France, the USSR and China, Japan and Italy, and then Germany. Okay, so several players have more than one major power. In Axis Empires, Italy and France are not considered major powers. They're minor powers, and they will, act like minor powers. So the way I would handle it is I wouldn't break the player positions by nationality. I would break them by map, except for the Soviets, because the Soviets in the Pacific are not really going to normally have that much to do. So I would have the Soviet player playing on both maps, and then I would have one Axis player and one Allied player on the European map, and then an Axis and an Allied player on the Pacific map. That's how I would play it, and that's 5 people. So I don't know. I believe that your Axis Empire, in fact, your Axis Empires is so well sorted that I then, after you got yours, I went and resorted mine the way I sorted yours, because the way yours is sorted was better than what I had in the first place. It helps to have gone through all the pieces at least once. So I am extremely happy with this game. I have played this before. I will play this again. This is an incredibly solid game. I think I've heard about this, actually. $330. I'm not going to tell you $330 is not expensive. It's expensive. It's quite expensive. But if you play it, it's probably worth it. If it's just going to sit on your shelf, then maybe it's not. But like I said, I have played this before, and I will play it again. And here's the whole thing set up. The maps are very attractive, and I think these are Joe Youst maps, as I recall. Real solid game system. The way the cards work is very interesting. This new edition also adds these like Fortunes of War cards that are more like a traditional special action type of cards, and you get a couple of those. You'll probably play like one of those cards a year per major power or something like that. You actually don't line the game up by major power. You line it up by faction. So you've got like the Western Allies and the Germans. You've got the Soviets and the Japanese, right? Those are basically the factions. And the Allies in the I really like I'll tell you what, Mark, I think Pacific War might end up being my grand experiment, if you will, for Cube for Me trays. I do like the Cube for Me trays anyway, but I was not able to get everything in the box in a satisfactory way, and I would be very curious to experiment myself with the Cube for Me Pacific War trays solution. So if you go to Cube for Me's website, Mike Reed, just search Cube for Me counter trays, and it'll come up. They're a little more expensive than GMT trays, but I also think they are the best counter trays available right now for war games specifically, for a number of reasons. One of which is that they're more durable than the GMT counter trays that everybody likes. They are easier to handle than the GMT counter trays that everybody likes. They have less airspace than the GMT counter trays. They are hands down, in my opinion, better than the GMT counter trays. But I still use plenty of GMT counter trays, and will continue to do so. I'm not sure I need to buy anymore because people keep giving, oh, you want GMT counter trays? Here you go. Here's 30. It's like, oh, okay. So I've got like, I don't know, 30 or 40 GMT counter trays just sitting around right now. I just have to sort through them and figure out which ones have lids that will actually attach to them. So honestly, I'm perfectly happy to use GMT trays. Steve Dolges just did a video about this, actually, about Cube for Me's trays, and he goes into all the different configurations that you can get, including the one counter deep trays, which are a very interesting idea, and I'm kind of trying to find a use case for that makes sense for me. But it is, in principle, the most efficient, least space-consuming way to store counters. Shipping, I don't know about now with the tariffs, but when I last ordered from Cube for Me, shipping was very reasonable and not that slow. Stuff showed up in a couple of weeks, as I recall. Now, I've of course done a lot of 3D printed trays too, and I'm going to continue using those as well. But I'm a kind of a weirdo about keeping the games organized, because storing counters outside the box costs me shelf space, and I don't like that, right? So I've got a pile of games that I would like. Oh, really? Didn't they? I thought they did a set of the conventional trays too. Actually, we might try this too. This might actually be the best solution for Pacific War, to be honest. Unfortunately, I would need to acquire some of the 5/8 inch 1 inch 1 counter deep trays. So I ordered a set for one of the GVOH, Alexander, perhaps, and then I immediately got them home, and they showed up, and I just sorted them out and used whatever. So I don't know what the hell I was doing at that point. I might be able to do it. And apparently, Mark says they have done both. Either way, Steve Dolges managed to get all of Pacific War into the conventional tray set for Pacific War, which I've got some of the. Cube Free was kind enough to send me some of the half-inch trays, and I'm just kind of like, I don't know what game would be right for this. To be honest, the 3D printed models are all still available on the site. So if anybody needs a link to that, send me an email and I'll give you a link to it. But I just haven't, since the printer hasn't been working, I haven't been working on any new models. Once the printer's working again, I will assuredly do some new models. At this point, I don't feel like I need to revisit the topic of counter storage, however, at least not that type of counter storage. So you'll see something different when I eventually do it. That said, somebody, I'm trying to remember who's the channel that has released a bunch of their own 3D printed counter designs for free. Those look great. So, I mean, check that out if you want. All right. Yeah. And I hate this. I sent an email to ADG at one point saying, look, how much would it cost for me to get like just an extra empty whiff box? And with the shipping shipped from Australia, it would have been like $50 or $60. And I'm like, nah, I'll just buy an extra copy of the game at that point. It is Nerd Workshop. Thank you, Alistair Logie and Jonathan Dyer. I mention them every week when we go through the GMT update, and it just wasn't coming into my head right now. The card boxes are good too. I like the card boxes as well. And in fact, I have now organized Seljuk into a Cube for Me card. The cards for Seljuk are going into Cube for Me trays. And what did I use for the counters? I'm pretty sure it was a Cube for Me product, whatever it was. So there's also 3D printed trays that somebody did, may have been Nerd Workshop, may have been somebody else for Space Empires. And I really would like to get my hands on those too, because all my Space Empires counters are stored outside the box right now. And in that case, with the extra 4-inch box, I might be able to get it all in baggies. And maybe I'll do that. I don't know. That might just be the easiest way to do it, is just say, here you go, yellow. Here's your yellow counters. Have a nice day. And then let them figure it out, because you're gonna have idle time in the game too to sort it out. So I'd be curious to know if people consolidate boxes like this, because I have been known to do this, to put the expansion that came in its own box in the game's main box and throw away the extra box. For example, my Civilization and Advanced Civilization, the Avalon Hill Francis Tresham Classics, are all in one box because I could fit it all in one box. They're just all in the Advanced Civilization box, and I tossed the original box. So I am going to kill that, pull this back up here, and I don't have any other visual aids for this time. ASL, I think, is one case where it's more or less hopeless to put everything in the boxes, but I have seen people attempt to do it. You just end up with weird configurations, like Soviets in a British box or something like that, and I don't really like that. I did miss SPI's Global War, but that's because I don't really know anything about it other than that it exists. Yeah, I've thrown away a lot of boxes in an effort to save space. I did that with Commands and Colors Napoleonics and Ancients, as a matter of fact. So whenever that goes up to Noble Knight to be sold off, and again, I'll keep Command the core game because I have an extra core game, but I don't need all this stuff for Commands and Colors Napoleonics. I don't play it enough. It's a terrific system. I like it a lot. I'll play it some more. I don't need a whole shelf consumed by Commands and Colors and all those blocks. Those are hard to store. So I probably missed more than just this, by the way, I would imagine. I mean, I missed Paulo Mori's Blitzkrieg and 1 Hour World War II. I routinely throw these away, I gotta tell you. Sometimes I would like cut it out so that it fits clean in the bottom of the box and maybe glue it down to kind of keep the art in the box. And I've done that with a couple of things, but generally speaking, the inserts just go away. The inserts are really there for shipping and not for storage. So I'm okay with tossing them, to be honest. I mean, if it's a game that I don't think I'm going to keep, that's different, but I don't normally buy games that I don't think I'm going to keep. I'm at least going to tell myself that I'm going to try and play this game or read it or whatever. And a lot of the older stuff I buy, this is not a concern with because there are no inserts and it isn't a problem. So now, that said, I've got a bunch of extra boxes that have come up from various things. So I got the new box and mounted map for the people, for example. So I've still got the old box for that. I've got a bunch of old OSG Library of Napoleonic battles that I managed to replace with new boxes because I bought some boxes and Zucker was kind enough to find one for me. You can totally make this work. You can absolutely make this work. I just don't bother most of the time because I don't care about the insert. I care about the game. So on the other hand, if somebody really needs to maintain the integrity of their game by keeping the insert, I respect that too. Don't get me wrong. I just don't. So Yeah, these are I think the 1-inch deep trays that we're talking about. The war is another good one that actually might work well with those 1 counter deep trays, because actually you get a lot of stuff in those, and it's difficult to fit them in counter trays. So, man, I've thrown away so many boxes. I've thrown away multiple entire sets of advanced squad leader boxes. Man, I can't keep the boxes. I consolidated all the old Avalon Hill boxes into the new MMP boxes, which I haven't thrown any of away because they're all holding unsorted components of various kinds. So, well, if you're doing this, then maybe you don't need to punch the games at all, and you don't even need to really worry about how you're storing the counters. I envy those folks in this position. Rommel's, Asparagus, and Stigler apparently are in that camp. I have, I don't know where it is off the top of my head. I've got a mason jar around here that I keep the blank counters in, because you never know when they might come up. And some of those bead trays that I was storing with counters in now went for blank counters, and I'll figure out a place to put those. If I ever need a blank counter, I'm covered. So, oh my God, it is, I actually was like letting them, I wasn't really keeping them. I had this idea, maybe I could make them into, mix them with paraffin and make fire starters out of them or something like that. And then my wife is like, is this a whole mason jar of counter clippings? And I said, yeah, maybe we can make fire starters. She said, no, you're a lunatic. Don't save these. This is disgusting. So I started throwing them away. And now they kind of pile up until I shake the box out in the trash. So I don't generally keep the punched counter sheets. I don't have time for that. So, so I will tell you this, and I understand if somebody doesn't share my opinion on this. If I get a game that's secondhand from eBay or Noble Knight or whoever it is, and it doesn't have dice and it doesn't have the blank counters, I don't care. I just don't. If it has the blank counters, cool. I might keep them. I kept the War in Europe blank counters, for example. It is like a million friggin' degrees in this room right now. That could be the scotch. Maybe I need some ice water. I have seen. Well, we all love Kai. Thank you, Kai. But I don't need Kai's permission. I bought it. It's my game. I can do what I want with it at this point. So now there was somebody at Cabs at one point that was collecting old counter sprues, and I had stacks of them that they just been piling up in my office. Here you go, take them. I'm happy to give them away. If somebody else has a use for them, that's cool. I'm happy to give them away. But if I don't know that that's the case, into the recycling bin they go. Space is a huge factor, right? I mean, I like my stuff to be organized, as you probably can tell. And I like to be able to find things and know where things are at. And that is not 100% compatible with me keeping things like empty counter sprues and stuff. Sometimes you should, because they'll have information on them. And sometimes I do, but not normally. Yeah, I mean, I can't say, Tony, I love you. I can't say this isn't weird. It really is kind of weird to save the counter clippings. The fact is, I filled up the mason jar. Do I want to dedicate a second mason jar to counter clippings? No, I do not. So I dumped the first jar, and then now just shake them out in the trash. So, yeah, I'm clipping Kingdom of Heaven right now. Actually, that's why. I don't have much of a problem with that map, but I haven't actually played on it yet either, so I can't really tell you that. So the reason that is there is because it is the game I am currently clipping, and I actually want to be moving back to some half-inch counters, but I want to finish this first too. So Tony is the Howard Hughes of wargaming. Yeah, well, I don't think he's keeping his toenail clippings, which would be actually disgusting. So, Kingdom of Heaven is a very well-regarded game, and I would love to play it, and I'm super interested in the Crusades. I got a bunch of books on the Crusades. I've played a number of other games on the Crusades. Armored Christian Soldiers is real solid. I would like to actually play the original SPI Crusades game, which is also a Berg design, but I think mine is missing a couple of pieces. So it was not given to me in time. So as Danny points out, don't forget to hit that like button, folks. And there's a whole bunch of ways to support the channel in the video description. All right. I don't think I have much more to say at this point, but there's 10 minutes, so I might just bullshit for 10 minutes. I'm also going to try not to blow any of the surprises for next week either. Really? I'll have to look at that. That doesn't, I mean, that is kind of the case, but I can probably live with that. It's a card-driven game, so there's a question about whether I can fit. No, this is not this room. It's not a different room. In fact, it is exactly the same room, but the door's open, which is different, and you're getting a different camera angle because I haven't figured out the OBS thing yet. It works fine. Virtual camera works fine, but virtual camera and StreamYard don't work fine, and I don't know why at this point. Oh my God. Can you imagine the number of counter clippings that I would have retained at this point, having clipped, Atlantic Wall, the Decision Atlantic Wall, War in Europe, I haven't clipped War in the Pacific. I mean, I've clipped an enormous number of Case Blue, clipped an enormous number of huge games. So, no, I know the camera angle's a little different from what it was before I went to Linux and had that issue. But no, this is exactly the same room. But the door being open behind me is unusual. I usually close it, and usually I do. I'm glad I didn't because I'm dying of heat stroke in here. Alistair Logie started a new game of No Man's Sky in about 20-30 hours, and he's starting to wonder why it gets tedious rather quickly. Yeah, I felt like that too. There's like a whole lot of oh yeah, I mean, my 2mm clipper alone is well into the hundreds of thousands of counters. Interesting lead. Look at that. It's our friend on Twitch. How about that? You know what that means, folks? We are going to stop streaming on Twitch because that guy does not get the satisfaction. So here you go, buddy. Have a nice day. Anyway, it did take 1 hour and 51 minutes for that to happen. Last time that happened, it was only 37 minutes. The camera angle is totally different because I'm not able to like crop the camera, which is something I normally do. And I might be able to do it in StreamYard. I haven't really tried it. I could normally like crop the camera and make adjustments and stuff like that to get the exact framing that I want in OBS, and then OBS sends the signal to StreamYard. That's how I always did it. And now I can't do that, so we're just running through StreamYard, which I guess is easier, but you see more of me, I suppose, and definitely more of the room. You could not see any of the role-playing game shelves over here prior to the camera angle changing. So the Traveler game is going well. We have played 3 sessions. We're going to play Team Agamemnon's going to have their session 2 this Friday. So I'm prepping for that. And then I think the week after that, we get Team Xerxes comes back for their 3rd session. And then we take the break for Christmas, after which there won't be another break until Winterfest. So the Traveler game is going extremely well. I am extremely happy with it. But that said, I'm also super rusty. I'm very happy with the universe I've created for us to play in. About 700 hours in No Man's Sky with 20 plus bases. I just never got that far in it. I bought it when it came out, and it was like everybody was disappointed. And I was like, this isn't that bad, but I'm not really sure where I'm going. Right, like where my gameplay is evolving to, and I haven't in any of my subsequent visits. I haven't gotten any further than that into the game. And if I'm gonna play that kind of like sandbox construction game, which I think you could play No Man's Sky as, then I might choose to play something different, like Minecraft. So that said, I have not yet tried to run No Man's Sky on Nobara. It did not run well out of the box on Mint. I can tell you that it ran, but it also was really, really choppy. But there's a lot of things you can do. You can change the compatibility layer you're using. There's a lot of different things. So yeah, I mean, the base building is a game changer right there. Yeah, I like the new. No, I'm not running that. And actually, that just ended. I was a player in a GURPS Twilight 2000 game, and that just ended by decision when I could not make it to a session. So I'm trying to fix the camera focus here. So that's why that's happening. What have I played video game wise? Not very much, to be completely honest, because I don't have that kind of time. But I got Elder Scrolls Online. I got that installed. It runs fine. It is all through Steam, except for Minecraft, which I played some of. I played a little bit of a couple of different Paradox games just to see if they work. They work fine. What else do I have? Team Fortress 2 I just installed. I haven't played it in years, but I was kind of curious as to whether it would work. And to my surprise, it didn't on Linux Mint. I suspect it will work 100% fine in Nobara and Skyrim. And that's basically it so far. But there's that. I didn't get that good. I see the problem with this is I never got that good at Europa Universalis. I've played a fair amount of EU4. I haven't picked up EU5 yet. I did pick up Crusader Kings 3 though, and because that was on sale somewhere. And that's a pretty interesting looking game, and I'd like to play it, and I haven't really figured out what position I want to play yet for like a long-term game, because that's not going to be the dude in Ireland that they want you to start as. So I am an Italian American and do a lot of talking with my hands, as you can probably tell, because I'm having clipped. I've got a decent number of counters clipped tonight, but not that much. I am happy to buy EU5 a year from now. That's cool by me. I don't care. It will go on sale, and Steam's big winter sale is going to start pretty soon too. I never did this in Skyrim, actually. Because the whole function feels kind of perfunctory to me, to be completely honest. I kind of got into the housing from Hearthfire or whatever it was called. One of the expansions, it added like a bunch of custom housing things that you could like build your own house out in the wilderness. It's not quite that freeform, but it kind of feels like it. I've played a little bit of that, but not too much. I kind of played through the tutorial, and that was about it. This sounds good. I would eat this. I had a ham sandwich for dinner because we were out all day, and nobody felt like cooking when we got home. So anyway, nice work. Thanks, guys. Don't forget to thumbs up the video. We're going to wrap this up probably right now, since I don't feel like yapping anymore. And I'd really like to go outside where it's 13 degrees instead of 113 in this office right now. So thanks everybody for coming out tonight. I think we managed to get a lot of topic discussion done, which is not necessarily something that happens every week, but hey, we're all getting what we're paying for here. So next week, don't forget, is the big 250th episode of the Counter Clipping Show. I'm going to have some announcements, which are probably not going to be that earth-shaking now that I think about it. We're going to have several giveaways, including this bad boy, right? Whatever is in this box of mystery will be given away next week to one lucky winner. So everybody tune in next week when we give away a very nice war game giveaway and a couple of RPG videos, which, I mean, it's Traveler stuff. Come on, it's Traveler stuff, okay? I will be giving away a couple of Traveler rulebooks as the role-playing game giveaway. So I don't think I'm shocking anybody by saying that. This, I'm not actually going to admit what's in it until next week. So do tune in for the big 250 next week. Your support, as always. And remember, just showing up, your support in the show, and I really do appreciate it. So everybody have a great rest of the week. We'll see you all again soon.